Most people are just winging life. They don't have a way of doing life. They're just winging it. They're waking up every day, just doing the best they can. And the effect of that is you recreate the past. Your life is precious. If you're winging life, fix it. I got the way to fix it. I'm at the stage in my life where I just want to help people because I feel so blessed for what I have.
You're a man living in the modern world in a time when men and manhood are not what they once were. You live life on your own terms. You're self-sufficient. You think for yourself and you march to the beat of your own drum. When life knocks you down, you get back up because in your gut, you know that's what men do. You're a badass and a warrior. And on the days when you forget, we are here to remind you who you really are.
Well, let me just say, I'm impressed with you guys. I really am, because you have the presence of mind to not try and navigate the world alone. And you're taking time out of your busy day to mastermind with other brilliant people. And so my hat is off to you. So here's basically my story. So I started out as a CPA. I grew up in Dallas, became a CPA, went to the University of Texas. And by the time I got to be late 20s, I realized, boy, I did not want to be a CPA all my life. I wanted to do deals instead of account for other people's deals. And so at 30, I became an entrepreneur and started out in real estate development and then evolved to owning a bank with about 20 other guys. Myself and one other guy were the main guys. Then evolved to owning a restaurant in Dallas that ultimately was voted most romantic restaurant in Dallas. Very cool little place. It was done in New York City, 1940 sort of motif. And it was dark. And we played Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and opera music. And on the weekends, there was like an hour wait spot for celebrities. In fact, I got to know Jerry Jones really well. And because it was dark and a lot of them came, Stevie Ray Vaughan came there. Sting would come there. One time I got a call from the White House and George Bush wanted to come. So it was a cool thing. But throughout my 30s and 40s, I was in 7 different businesses. But when I hit 50, I just wasn't as successful as I thought I should be. And, I had 2 goals in my life: to make enough money so I didn't have to work, and to find the woman of my dreams. And so at 50, I'm falling short of both. And, on the money, I always did pretty well as an entrepreneur, 200, 300,000 a year. But, when I hit 50, as materialistic as this sounds, I realized I had to start netting $1 million a year if I wanted to have the exceptional life I always dreamed of. And then on the girl, at 50, I had never been married, but I did a lot of interviewing, if you know what I'm saying to you. And a lot of fun with that. But, never could find quite the right one. And so probably, 3 months after I turned 50, I'm laying in bed trying to think, how do I go to the next level? And the idea comes to me to find the top book in the world on success and apply that book literally word for word in my life. And so I'm like, wow, that is a pretty good idea. So I jump out of bed, do the research, and I discover something that blew me away. There's one book that has been read by 150 million people, and it's the top book in the world on success by a factor of 10. And that book is Think and Grow Rich. And here's what I find interesting. I find it interesting today, just like I did many years ago. Only 1 in 7 people has ever heard of Think and Grow Rich. Well, what does that tell you about our culture. When we live in a success-oriented culture, and there's one book that's the top book in the world on success by a factor of 10, but only 1 in 7 people has ever heard of it. To me, that's mind-blowing. Anyway, as soon as I realized it was the top book in the world on success by a factor of 10, I'm like, perfect. This couldn't be any more perfect. And so I rush out, I buy the book, and I read the book. Then I discover the problem. The book says there's a secret for success, but the author only gives you half of the secret. It's on the reader to figure out the other half. Well, I'm bummed out, and I mope around, and probably for 3 weeks. And then, one day I just wake up and go, John, man up, figure out the friggin' secret. And so I just immersed myself in the book over 2 or 3 months and probably read it, 20 times to figure out the secret. And ultimately, I do figure out the secret and develop a 12-minute-a-day technique to apply it. And so I started applying it to a new business I was starting in the reverse mortgage field. And suddenly, my income starts doubling and doubling and doubling to where 4 years later, I'm making 25 times the 200 to 300 grand a year I was making the prior 20 years. But what was so amazing about this, and of course, I felt so blessed, as you can imagine. But what was really cool is I could see why it was happening. I was just playing the game of life at a higher level. I could do things I could never do before, and I had a level of control over my life beyond what I'd ever experienced before. And I just became fascinated by the fact that you could take 2 key scientific principles and apply them to your life, and so materially impact your success. And so ultimately, I got enough money so I didn't have to work. And this is about 10 years ago. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to share this with the world. And a month or two after I sold my company, I meet the former chancellor and president here at the University of Texas. And I tell him my story. And he says, hey, you got to teach this at Texas. And why don't we teach it together? And so off we go. It takes, 2 years to get the course approved. And so we start teaching it. And then he introduces me to the athletic director. And for you that don't know, we're proud about this at the University of Texas. Texas is the biggest brand in college sports. Takes in more money than any other university, including Ohio State, Notre Dame. So it's the biggest brand in college sports. And over the last 3 out of the last 5 years, we've been blessed to win the Directors Cup, which is the top athletic program in the country based on winning in all sports. Anyway, I get introduced to the athletic director, probably 5 years ago. And he says, well, I want to learn this 12-minute-a-day technique. So I teach it to him. And he says, well, why don't you become the mental coach for the 18 head coaches and create a program for them every week? And so I do that. And then the latest iteration was, he probably got tired of me saying this, but I would oftentimes tell him, I go, if I knew at 20 what I learned at 50, what a difference it would have made. And so he says, well, let's create a course that is all your stuff, and let's teach it to all 550 athletes at the University of Texas, and we'll get the business school to create the course and approve the course. I had to create it; they approved it, and that was hard because Texas its business school is ranked in the top 5 in the country, up there with Harvard and some of the other big ones. And so that was hard to do, but we got it done. And I started teaching it for the first time last semester, and it was pretty cool. I have the class is athletes, half non-athletes, and like I had Arch Manning in my class last year, so that was fun. And so that is sort of the overview of my story. And, you know, let me ask you guys a question that I think is pertinent. So just think about this. How do you create success in your life? Just think about that. How do you create success in your life? Well, here's what I find when I'm in person with somebody and I ask them that question. Usually nobody's asking that question, and they hem and haw around and they come up with something, and then I'll repeat it back to them. And then the more significant question is, so how's that working for you? Well, usually not that good if they're really honest. You know, their career isn't quite where they want it. Their marriage isn't quite what they want it to be. Their health isn't quite what they want it to be. And you know what I see today, and I can say this to you because this was me until I was 50. Most people are just winging life. They don't have a way of doing life. They're just winging it. You know, they're waking up every day, just doing the best they can. And the effect of that is you recreate the past. And here's the problem that we all face every day. The first problem is we're innately wired for survival, which causes 75% of your thoughts to be fear-based, and you're reactive rather than proactive on your important agenda. Then the second problem is we're oriented to the recent past. So when you wake up each morning, you think about your problems and you think about your recent slights, and that generates negative feelings. And those negative feelings create more negative thoughts, and you get in this continual negative loop that causes you effectively to recreate the past. And here's the solution, and I'll get into the solution a little deeper, but the solution is to create immense clarity in your life and feed the succinct articulation of your desired life to yourself each day. And when you do that, you have this powerful force pulling you forward to your desired life. And this is effectively leveraging yourself through science. And I'll explain the science in a minute. But that's sort of the overview. Let me explain the full secret of Think and Grow Rich. And I'll share something very personal with you. So when I turned 50, there was a little more going on with me than just feeling the scarcity of time. My mom was dying of pancreatic cancer. And so every day after work, I'd go to the hospital and see her. And she was in the hospital for like 8 weeks. And so I'd go see her after work, and I'd hold her hand and I'd love on her. And then I would go in the cold, dark hospital parking lot and cry my eyes out for 45 minutes every night, gut-wrenching crying. And, I had never experienced that level of angst in my life. And obviously, I was feeling the impending loss of my mom. But I knew there was something more to it because, again, I'm crying and crying for like 45 minutes every night. And when that's happening every night, it's, something's going on. And what I came to realize is that I felt like I was letting my mom down with my life. My mom and dad gave me everything. They sent me to Jesuit high school in Dallas when they didn't really have the money. They sent me to the University of Texas. I didn't have to pay for a thing. And, at 50, all I had to show for my life was the average life. And guys, I got to tell you, I hated the average life. I mean, I hated the average life because I knew I was capable of so much more. But why couldn't I get it out? And so what I now realize is that feeling of letting my mom down caused me to go deeper into Think and Grow Rich than any other person on the planet to figure out the secret. And I remember the night that I discovered the full secret like it was yesterday. And on this particular night, it was snowing in Dallas. And so I'd gone and I saw my mom. And, in Dallas, it doesn't snow very often. So it just felt different. So I go and I see my mom and go out in the parking lot and cry my eyes out like every other night. And I start driving home and I see those big snowflakes hitting the windshield and it just feels different. And so I get home and I start reading a little Think and Grow Rich for like the 20th time. And that night I read, first of all, that your daily actions determine your success in each area of your life. The cumulative effect of your daily actions determine your success in your career, in your marriage, in your health. Well, I'd never thought about success in such simple terms, but I certainly agreed with it. Then I read that essentially 95% of your daily actions and thoughts are unconscious. Well, by now I'm ready to go to bed. So I wash my face and brush my teeth, and I put my little head on the pillow. But guys, I can't stop thinking about 95% of my daily thoughts and actions are unconscious. And, after laying there for 15 minutes, I'm like, I sit up in bed and it's a total epiphany. I'm like, wait a minute. If your success in life comes down to your daily actions, and 95% of them are unconscious, if you don't gain control over those unconscious daily actions, hey, just do the math. You're playing the game of life at 5% of your potential. And, that was so enlightening for me because I always felt like there was there was more in the tank than was coming out. And at that moment, I realized, I see why I feel that way. And note, I promise you, most of y'all feel that way. I'm sharper than whatever the results I'm getting are, but why don't I have better results? And so, I remember, looking out in my backyard, seeing the snow falling, and I'm like, this is a pivotal point in my life. And then the full secret of Think and Grow Rich comes to me. And the full secret is what you envision in detail with emotion on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. And what that means is, or let me say that again, what you envision in detail with emotion on a daily basis is what shows up in your life. And what that means is you create immense clarity about your life, exactly the person you want to be, exactly what you want to accomplish, and precisely how you're going to achieve your clearly defined goals. And you take that clarity and you put it on a template that I've created that also helps you create the clarity. And then you start feeding that to yourself every day, either reading it or listening to it. And after approximately 21 days, the science kicks in, the magic happens, and what you're feeding yourself starts showing up in your thoughts and actions automatically without thinking. And the effect is three things. First of all, you have this sense of immense control over your life. Well, of course you would. You're feeding the succinct articulation of your life to yourself each day. Of course you feel that way. Then secondly, you feel an immense sense of confidence. Well, that's directly related to the level of control you feel over your life. And then the third thing you experience after 21 days, again, the right actions start happening automatically. And once that starts happening, you realize, wow, this is like I have a superpower because it is a superpower. So that's essentially how it works. And so here's how the human mind works. And as I get into the science, you're going to see this is so friggin' simple, it hurts. But here's how the human mind works. The conscious mind sets your intentions, and is influenced by logic. The subconscious mind controls your daily actions, or 95% of them. But for practical purposes, your subconscious mind controls your daily actions, and it's only influenced by repetition. And here's an example of how that works. Let's say you want to lose weight. Conscious mind sets the intention to lose weight based on the logic of the health benefits. Well, the reason people fail to lose weight is not from lack of intention, but rather from lack of influence in the part of their brain that controls their actions, their subconscious mind, which only responds to repetition. So they're not influencing the actions associated with losing weight, the eating habits and exercise habits. And so the recap on that, again, conscious mind sets the intention based on logic. Subconscious mind is the obedient servant of the conscious mind, and it only responds to repetition, and it's controlling your actions. And here's something you'll find interesting. So again, this methodology is a constant between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. But so the conscious mind is influenced by logic, and it requires a whole lot of brain power. Well, the doing part of you, the subconscious mind, is a more primitive part of you, and it only responds to repetition. And this issue of logic is sort of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's good that the subconscious mind does not have logic, because the subconscious mind, again, is the obedient servant of the conscious mind, and it doesn't argue with the conscious mind. When the conscious mind says, okay, here's my intention, here's the actions I need you to take, it just doesn't. It's not going to argue with the conscious mind because it doesn't have the power of logic. But the downside on it is that the subconscious mind has no memory. So, you may think, well, wait a minute, subconscious mind, I just told you last week, here's the intention, here's the actions I need to take. Well, again, it doesn't have logic or memory, and that's why you have to feed what you want every day, every single day, because that's what the subconscious mind, the part that is controlling your actions, only responds to. So, and let me give you maybe an example of how this works. And this happened a couple years ago. I have a client up in Portland, and when I've coached entrepreneurs, I have a pretty simple arrangement. If I can't double your income within a year, I'll give you your money back. And I'd only take people that are making minimum $200,000 as a client. And so I take this guy up in Portland. He's making a couple million. So he takes me up on my offer. And anyway, he and his girlfriend are in coming to San Antonio, which is about an hour from Austin. He says, come meet us for dinner. So I get my wife, and it's a Friday, and it's around Christmas, and we're out and about. And I tell Jen, I go, listen, meet me at Starbucks at 2:00, and then we'll jump in my car and go meet Wade. Well, I get there a little early. I decide to have a brownie. And, one of the things I affirm in my visualization that takes 12 minutes a day is that I'm aware of everything I put in my mouth. Well, I start eating that brownie. I'm aware of it. I'm aware it doesn't taste very good, but I keep on eating it, and I finish it. Then Jen shows up. We jump in my car, and we're driving to San Antonio, and I tell her, babe, I don't feel very good. I've sort of lost my appetite. And so we go to San Antonio, and that night I come back home, and I change one word in my visualization from I'm aware of everything I put in my mouth to I evaluate everything I put in my mouth. Well, the next night we go out and have Mexican food with her son. And I order tacos. Tacos come, and they're not very good. And this time, I just slide those tacos away. I don't have another bite and don't think anything of it. That all happens automatically. And when I was laying in bed that night, I'm like, boy, if that's not a superpower where you can get yourself to do the right actions automatically without thinking, I don't know what is. But that's a quick example and a little background on the science.
So, John, there's a bunch of men here that are in different spaces in their life and in their business. I'm going to pick on one of them because he's in a place right now that you were when you were 50, and that's Lewis. Lewis, say hello to Mitchell, tell him your story, and ask him any questions that you want to ask him, because I think this man can probably guide you better than anybody.
Okay. I had my business for years. I'm successful with it, but it's exactly like you said. I feel very similar to what you said, that it's like, I feel like I'm wasting my brain on my business and wasting my talent.
Right.
On what I'm doing. Like, I just know I could be making 10, 20 times more and just doing other things that can be completely different than what I'm doing.
Right.
I'd enjoy doing more, use my brain more, use my talents more, and also give back to the world and society more in its entirety. Just turned 48 on January 12th. Lost my father to cancer on January 12th on my birthday. And it's like, it's what you said. I feel very similar. I feel like I just want to change things around and do something different. Just get out of this business or get it 20x or something, and just change things and just do things. And it's like, and life's been a bit on pause for a year and a half as my dad was dying from cancer, which is okay. Like, I was there in very, very similar experiences to exactly what you said. Like, we recently took my father to Florida for the past 5 weeks of his life, and I was there and hold his hands and taking care of him, getting him out of bed in the morning, and then I'd wander out of the house and just collapse, crying like a baby. Right. Very, very very, very similar. Very, very similar.
Well, let me ask you a question. How do you create success in your life?
How do I create success in my life in all areas?
Yeah. I'm talking big picture.
Hard work, discipline. Don't like to give up on things.
Right. So how's that working for you?
Mediocre. I'd say it's worked really well in staying healthy and fit in that area.
Right.
Better, but I'm good at that.
Let me suggest this.
Yeah.
I get the feeling you're probably like I was. I worked harder than all my friends. You work harder than most of your friends?
I do travel and vacation often, but when I'm working, I work harder than most people. I feel like as
right.
You saw me in the car and running up to get into my condo because I was working at my office until
right
minutes of time getting onto this thing.
Well, here's what I realized not right at 50, but when I crossed over to netting, millions a year, was that the first half of my life, I was just working hard. Then I saw the power of working smarter. And I'd heard of working smarter, but nobody ever really explained what that really is. And I saw that applying the central concept of the top book in the world on success in a 12-minute a day technique is working smarter. And here's something that Lewis, you'll probably appreciate. So, and as well, maybe everybody else. So I went and I thought, if I'm going to spend my life teaching this to other people, I'm going to show it to the top expert in the world on success and see what he or she thinks of it. Is there something similar to it? Is there a flaw in it? Just what do they think? So I determined that Darren Hardy is the top expert in the world on success. I fly out there with Ginger. We spend 3 days with him, and the moment comes, I show him my template, and he looks at it and he goes, this is really good. But he says, John, people aren't going to spend 12 minutes a day on this. And I'm like, Darren, how the hell can that be? You know, at 25x my income, Time Magazine did a cover story on the science behind it. And we're applying the central concept of the top book of the world on success to people's lives. What do you mean they're not going to spend 12 minutes a day on that? He says, John, you know, you're new to the success business. And the dirty little secret is that for the vast majority of people, more success is merely a preference, merely a preference. And he says, that's 98% of people. And, you know, when he told me that, I'm like, you know, everybody in this culture wants to be more successful. I got an actual way of doing life, you know, and how do you get more credible than the top book of the world on success and the central concept? Well, I was wrong and he was right. He was dead right. And I went from trying to teach this to everybody to going, oh, this is for the 2%, the 2% that are really serious about being successful. And again, that's only 2% of the people. 98% of them would like to be more successful, but it's not worth to them to take the time to create the clarity. And it's not worth it to them to take 12 minutes a day to have a better marriage and to have, you know, more success in their career. Now, if you're in the 2%, you're like, I can't imagine that. But we're looking at it from our standpoint. I'm telling you, that's those people is more success is merely a preference. So no, that's the last few years. This has been totally freeing to me because I'm like, the hell with the 98%, but there's a lot of 2%ers. And so that's where I spend my time and energy. But back to you, I think you've got to look at yourself and go, am I just winging life? Because from what I can see, and again, I say this respectfully, I think you're just winging life because I was winging life, you know, because nobody ever said, you know, John, there's a better way to do this thing. And it's the difference between working harder and working smarter. Well, and let me share one other thing about that. And thank you for being vulnerable. So, you know, this idea of creating the succinct articulation of your life and feeding it to yourself each day, that's the central concept of Think and Grow Rich. And conceptually, you may go, yeah, that sounds pretty good. But then you think a little deeper on this and you go, well, wow, I got to create this immense clarity in my career and in who I want to be as a person and in my health and in my marriage. That sounds daunting. Well, I created last year with the help of some technology wizards that are, you know, really brilliant. I created an AI algorithm where all you got to do is answer approximately 50 questions. And I give you an example of the answer. And I also have incorporated ChatGPT in it if you need to condense your answers. And you just answer the 40 or 50 questions, press a button, and 10 seconds later, my template is customized to your life. Because, you know, I've been doing this for, 20 years. So I am well versed on what does clarity look like in each area of your life. But 20 years ago, I damn sure wasn't clear about all that. So that's why I wouldn't expect you to be clear on that. But that's, to me, I think the maybe the beauty of what I've created. And I look at every one of you guys as a younger version of myself. I really do. And like I said at the start, I admire that you guys have the wisdom to do what you're doing.
Yeah, I think you should get a copy of his book.
Book. I mean,
y'all go to Amazon, everybody. It's called Missing Secret of the Legendary Book Think and Grow Rich, inspired by true events, by John Mitchell.
So I bought the book 5 minutes ago, really excited to read it. Um, and my brain is screaming because you're very right about the 98% of people. And I'm witnessing my own mediocrity. So my brain is just freaking out right now. I'm over here freaking out. So thanks very
That's a
much.
good sign.
Yeah.
You're not alone, man. You're not alone.
So my business is I'm a financial advisor and I teach people how to get more out of their money. And I'm really more curious about the natural actions. After 21 days, the confidence, the clarity kicks in. That's amazing. You start taking the right actions naturally. I probably can't see what those right actions are for me to say triple my business,
Right.
right? Because I'm in this paradigm right now, and the future thing that I want is over there in another paradigm, so I can't see it now.
Right.
Right. Can you just speak more about those natural actions though? Like,
Right. Well,
I mean?
here's if we're talking about your career and making a major increase in how much you're making, here's how this works. On the template, you're going to define 6 things: your succinct business plan, your strategy for success, the 2 or 3 things that move the needle, where you want your business to be 3 years from now, what are the 4 or 5 milestones to get there, and what is the linchpin issue to go to the next level. And the way most people run their business is they have a business plan and they tweak it once a year and put it back on the shelf. Terrible way to run a business. As opposed to I didn't have a business plan. My business plan was my visualization that addressed those 6 things. And once you address those, you start seeing bigger picture. Like, as an example, where do you want to be 3 years from now? And you make yourself figure out what are the 4 or 5 milestones to get there. Now you're starting to create that path. Oh, I've got to do this. I've got to do this. I've got to do this to get there. And, when you first create it, it's probably not going to be perfect. In fact, it's probably going to be 60% great and 40% dead wrong. But by virtue of reading it every day and feeding it to yourself every day, your conscious mind is constantly tweaking it. And you're going down this rabbit hole of understanding yourself and your business at a deeper and deeper level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
I'll share something with you and you tell me if this is right. I do a few podcasts. And when I explain my method, I'm like, and you can sort of feel whether the audience is getting it or not. Well, I'm not really this way now, but I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? I mean, do you have a better way of doing life that has more credibility than what I'm bringing to the table? You're applying the central concept at the top book of the world on success. I'm blessed to have my methodology vetted at one of the top 5 business schools. I just don't think, and again, I don't want this to sound like bragging. I'm just being honest, that I'm like, if you're not going to do this, it's got to make perfect logical sense. But why aren't everybody doing it? Well, I realize that not everybody's doing it because they're not driven to do it. They're certainly not doing it because they see a flaw in the logic of it, but they're just not driven enough to do it. I would love y'all's input on that. Anybody want to share am I right or am I wrong?
Oh,
am I
you're
missing
right.
something?
You're right.
No, you're 100% right.
The 98%, yeah, the preference, more success is merely a preference for 98% of people. Preference is the right word, like mere preference. I almost wonder if there's another word like, slight interest, probably. You know what I mean?
Preference is the right word, grammatically speaking.
It's all right, but you know what I mean?
Well, thank you for that, because I've never said that to anybody because this is what I thought in my head, but, very helpful to me. And and here's something that has totally helped me. I learned about the disc profile. There's 4 different personality types, and like I'm a D, and my wife is maybe a C, a perfectionist. That is sort of the CEO, hard charging type of guy, and so which type you are is a function of how fast you do things. And so, like my wife, again, also task oriented. Well, we have a party for my class, Christmas party. And Ginger comes to me and she says, listen, we're going to have all these people over here. I want to get some new artificial jellyfish for our aquarium. Well, the old John Mitchell would have said, babe, are you freaking nuts? They're not going to notice the jellyfish, But the new John Mitchell went, well, wait a minute, she's just processing information differently than I am. And to her, that's really important. So, a year ago, I would have said, babe, you got to be crazy. But the new and improved John Mitchell, and of course, I fed this into my visualization, is let her be her. She's just processing information. And my response to her when she said it was, babe, knock yourself out. Get those, even though it's going to take her, 4 hours, and it's probably going to cost me $500 to get the aquarium guy out. I'm like, knock yourself out. And so the point of that story is, we all have a tendency to think when people don't look at things like we do, that they're inferior to us or they're unenlightened. No, they're just processing information differently. And that has affected me in teaching my methodology, whereas used to be at sometimes at a conscious level and sometimes at an unconscious level, I'm like, what's wrong with you people? Now I'm not like that. I'm like, hey, if you get this, great. If you don't get it, no problem. You're just processing information differently. This seems so logical to me, but I respect that you're processing life differently than I am. And this has been very, I don't know, just very comforting now to let people be different than me. And so hopefully that helps you.
Mitchell, in our community, we've had men come and stay with us for the long haul. We'd also had lots of men leave. And there was a period where some of the men are going, oh my God, what are we doing wrong here? Why aren't we retaining men? One of our men, ARPA, the man who led the check-in, said to us, to all of us, we're not doing anything wrong. They're not the right men.
Yeah.
They're not ready to do the work. Said, you're going to bring men in here and they're going to try it out. And then they're going to hit the immovable rock that is our standards. And some men are going to handle that well, and some men are not going to handle that well. You may have noticed some of the men were checking in the improper order. And
right.
Our standard is you check in the proper order. There's a reason we do that, because high standards make for high value, high level men.
Right.
And no standards or low standards make for sloppy men that lose. And what you're saying that Darren Hardy told you is a brilliant other way of saying what ARPA said to all of us. Most people are not prepared to do the work, but the men that are here today, these men are all prepared to do the work. And when I told them about you coming to speak for us, all these men were really excited to come and listen to what you had to say.
One thing I would say to you is, the most significant thing I ever learned was that 95% of my daily thoughts and actions are unconscious. Because once I got that through my thick head and understood that, and of course I got it at more or less the same time, I'm learning and Think and Grow Rich that my daily actions determine my success. And maybe it was that learning those two things at the same time that was pivotal.
Yeah.
It was so easy to connect the dots that my subconscious mind controls my life.
Yeah.
It's literally that simple. And it's amazing how easily manipulated the subconscious mind is. Again, it's the obedient servant of the conscious mind. And so you have a choice. You can let your subconscious mind be your greatest asset, or it can be your greatest nemesis in life, because keep in mind, you are innately wired to be fear-based and reactive. And that was great 50,000 years ago. But it's the opposite of how you need to be productive, creative, and happy. And I see that at the end of the day, your success in life, as well as your enjoyment life, comes down to the thoughts that are going on in your head most of the time. And what my methodology does is it impacts the creation of your thoughts.
Amen. Amen.
Okay.
I'm Vincent Lupo. I'm in the merchant services field, sell point of sale systems and credit card processing. And you said something interesting about clarity. I definitely lack clarity. I've lacked clarity and discipline, and I can talk a lot of nonsense about all the things I want. But really, if I take a look at myself honestly, am I taking those actions that will produce the result I'm looking for? And the answer is no. I have not. I haven't been willing to put in the work. But one thing I struggle with is defining clarity. So in my situation, when I'm looking at, do I start my own business or continue to work for the company I'm with? And I always kind of seem to be in that position of stuck between two places and never having that clarity that's going to drive me forward.
So how did it hit you when I said to the other gentleman, how do you create success? I think what I got out of that, respectfully to him, and I would have probably said what he said, it was clear he's just winging life. Do you feel like you're winging life?
Yeah, 100%. That's I wouldn't even know how to answer that question. I mean, I do a lot of things in certain areas, but some questions like that, I really don't have an answer. And I see it's lack of clarity.
Well, I think from a bigger standpoint, there's so much value in I'm teaching you a way to do life. And I see in the success business, nobody out there is teaching a way of doing life. They're teaching you different strategies, but all they're impacting is your intentions, not the actions associated with the intentions that make the intentions turn into reality. But, most of the time, people have never been asked, how do you create success in your life? And they realize, oh, I don't really have a way. And that's what I want to do, is sort of wake people up to this. And maybe the final thing I'll maybe leave you with is that maybe this will be meaningful to everybody. So I had my first grandbaby 3 years ago. And so the day after she was born, Ginger and I go over to my daughter's house, and this is the day after the baby's born. And there's a lot of oohing and aahing about the baby. And but for some reason, they give me the baby and they walk away. And I'm holding that precious little girl in my arms, and I feel the warmth of her body against mine. And I start crying because I realize how precious this life is. And she's going to live to be 100 years old. And again, the thoughts that are going on in her head most of the time are going to determine her success and her enjoyment of life. And how that relates to each one of you is your life is precious. Your life is precious. And if you're winging life, fix it. Fix it. I got the way to fix it. And, the cost is $25 for my book. And, I don't have a back end that I'm going to try and sell you a $20,000 thing. I'm at the stage in my life where I just want to help people because I feel so blessed for what I have that if I can help you and impact your life, because again, you're just a younger version of me.
So, Mitchell, I'm going to push back a little on what you said.
Okay.
So I'll be candid. Even among the 2%, your book, a maximum of 10, 20% of the power in it will get to somebody. That's out of Glasser choice theory. The real way that you're going to have an impact on people is if you teach them how to teach this, because A, they'll learn it better and they'll be able to use it better and they'll be able to teach it to people. So ironically, I know you want to help people and you don't need the money and all that stuff, but if you really want to reach the most number of people, you and I should talk about you creating a back end and getting people to be more invested in this, because the more invested they are in this, the more they're going to learn it and apply it. A $25 investment is not as powerful as a $10,000 investment. Now, I'm not saying you should be charging $10,000, but people that pay more will learn it more, and we can say, we don't want you to just learn this. We want you to learn this to the point that you can teach it to people. So it could be a licensable thing. That's my pushback.
I completely agree with that. I have, I tell you, and maybe I told you this the other day, but, I sort of got tired of teaching the methodology, and oftentimes teaching it to people that were halfway committed to it, but where I'm at now is I'm like, read the book, it's all there. And if you embrace it, then I will, bend over backwards to help you apply it in my future.
You're awesome that way. You're awesome that way.
But exactly what you said is right. Yeah. I think this is really a methodology that should be taught to coaches who then teach it to their
and then license it 100%. It should be a licensable program, and I'm happy to talk to you about that offline because I kind of help people do that. But
right, that's
brilliant. That's beautiful. Okay, so all right. Thanks again. I'll be in touch tomorrow. I'll give you a call, Mitchell. Thank you. Take care.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to the Sovereign Man podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and become the man you've always wanted to be, we invite you to join the movement at sovereignman.ca.